Welcome to the 6th episode of my Wellness Breathing Stretching channel. In this episode, I'll talk about integrating some of our core muscles into the Extended-Exhalation Breathing Technique. The term core muscles refers to the muscles of our trunk or our torso, to the exclusion of our limbs and head. Our core muscles support the spine, pelvis, and shoulder girdle, stabilizing our posture at rest and in movement. We will focus here on two groups of muscles, the pelvic floor muscles and the horizontal and oblique muscles of our abdomen. In pranayama, the breathing branch of yoga, the maneuver that engages pelvic floor muscles is called Mula Bandha, and the maneuver that engages the horizontal and oblique muscles of our abdomen is called Uddiyana Bandha. In Sanskrit, Mula means root and Bandha means lock, so Mula Bandha is the root lock, referring to the root position and the root role of our pelvic floor. Uddiyana means upward flying, so the upper abdominal lock, Uddiyana Bandha, is called upward flying because of the upward motion of the lock. In fact, both locks involve an upward motion. Performing the two locks is good for us, both as an exercise that strengthens these important muscles, but also as an inner experience that fires up the flow of energy in our physical body and our mental disposition. I'll first describe how these locks are performed, and then I'll incorporate them into our extended exhalation breathing technique. Let's start with our pelvic floor muscles. We're usually aware of our pelvic floor muscles when we need to hold back bladder or bowel movement till we find the bathroom. This is a very familiar and common bodily state of affairs. When these muscles are weak, they start to leak. We sometimes hear the line, "I laughed so hard I peed in my pants," because laughter applies pressure on the bladder, which needs to be resisted. Performing the root lock is quite easy. Engage these muscles as if you're trying to resist the need to urinate. A visual cue to help you understand how to do it is to imagine closing a zipper from your pubic bone up to your belly button. Performing the abdominal lock is a less familiar muscular experience because there is no common bodily state of affairs where we actually need to do it. Therefore, often metaphorical language is used to help the beginner to get the hang of it. Think of the horizontal and oblique muscles as a bodily corset, and now imagine that you tighten the corset. Additionally, try to lift your belly button up and into your rib cage. This is the upward flying motion of the lock. Think of how you pull up the shoelaces when you tighten your boots. Apply this image to your imaginary corset. Now let's combine the two locks, the root lock and the abdominal lock. At the moment, we start with the root lock and instantly follow it by the abdominal lock. With some training, both will happen simultaneously. So here we go. First, lift the zipper, then pull and tighten the string of your corset. Hold them both for a short while. Now release. Again, zip, tighten, hold both. Release. Zip, tighten, hold. Release. Zip, tighten, hold. Release. Zip, tighten, hold, release. I hope you get the feel of it. Now, how do we combine the two locks with our breathing? The point at which we engage the root and abdominal locks is when we start exhalation, and we try to hold the two locks throughout the extended exhalation. If you have listened to episode 5, you surely recall that during the extended exhalation, we also perform Ujjayi breathing. Indeed, Ujjayi breathing and the two locks go hand in hand. Ujjayi exhalation helps us extend and stabilize our exhalation so it is uniform from beginning to end, thus increasing our carbon dioxide tolerance. At the same time, the two root locks help us strengthen our core muscles and intensify our experience. But if you chanced upon this episode without prior exposure to the extended exhalation breathing technique, just ignore the whole Ujjayi business. You can check it out later in episode 5 of this podcast. Let's now combine the two locks with our breathing. The idea is to keep holding the two locks during our extended exhalation. So, get into a comfortable, straight-up sitting position on a chair, pillow, or yoga mat. Take a deep, satisfying inhalation through your nose. Now, as you start exhaling through your nose, zip, tighten, hold both locks, release. Finish exhaling and suspend your breath for a short while. Let's do it again. Take a deep, satisfying inhalation through your nose. Now, as you start exhaling through your nose, zip, tighten, hold both locks, release. Finish exhaling and suspend your breath. Now, surprise, surprise, see if you can continue holding the two locks even after you end the exhalation, all the way throughout the suspension of your breath. Let's give it a try. Take a deep, satisfying inhalation through your nose. Now, as you start exhaling through your nose, zip, tighten, hold both locks, keep holding both locks while you finish exhaling, and hold them while you suspend your breath. Release. Those of you who have heard episode 4 surely recall that during the suspension of breath, we may also perform a throat lock. So if you continue the root lock and the abdominal lock beyond your exhalation and into the suspension of your breath, and if you suspend your breath with a throat lock, then, as a matter of fact, you find yourself performing all three basic locks of pranayama simultaneously. In yogic literature, the simultaneous performance of all three basic locks, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, and Jalandhara Bandha, is known as the Mahabandha, or the Great Lock. Mahabandha is widely considered to have profound mental and spiritual effects in different yoga traditions, even if specific descriptions vary in detail. Personally, I'm a minimalist in narrating my spiritual experiences, but I can certainly say that I feel great delight and gratification when I perform the Mahabandha three-way lock. We have engaged our core muscles in the root and abdominal lock in seated breathing meditation. Obviously, it is easier and therefore also advisable to start performing the two locks in a relaxed seated position, in the way I just guided you. But we can also perform the root and abdominal locks while exercising, as for example in vigorous walking. Here things seemingly become more complicated because we add to the breathing and the locks also the counting of steps. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please listen to episode 1 of this podcast. If you do, try to integrate everything into one whole. But remember, think progress, not perfection. It is a long process and it helps if you take a playful attitude towards it. I hope you found this episode to be of value to you. I'll be very glad to hear from you about your experience with the root and abdominal locks. You can leave me a comment on my Wellness Breathing Stretching podcast channel. You may also spread the word by sharing my podcast channel with friends and colleagues. One way of hearing about my forthcoming episodes is to check the follow or subscribe button on your podcast application. So long, and see you again on future episodes.